I have three panelists, Tim Brown from CA, and then Sarwar Kazmiri from Strategic Communications, is that what you call it? And of course, Mike Cody, who is the CEO and chairman of SecureWorks. And what we're going to do, which is a company that is in the middle of this marketplace, what I've asked Mike to do is to give a 15-minute presentation. Cyber threats, I'm sure all of you have read about this in the newspaper. Everybody has some idea what it means when somebody's credit cards get stolen or somebody does a denial of service. But what we have found as we had conversations with our members is there isn't a very good understanding of the overall issue and how big it is and how fast it's changing. And so what we're going to do, we thought it would be a great way to start the session, is to have Mike give us an overview so we can sort of set the groundwork on what cyber threats are, and then we can talk about the specifics of how to respond to them and what the issues are going forward. So I hope you don't mind. We took a little bit of liberty to do that. With that, I'll ask Mike to go up and sort of cover off on the issues for us.
So, if you go into Google and type in hacker, how many hits will you get? 10? 10 million. 10 million. It's actually 183 million the last time I did it. Tried to do it in the back of the room for my BlackBerry, but it wouldn't give me the number of hits. But it's typically been north of 100 million to 200 million. And most interesting, every time I've done it, the third one is how to become a hacker. And if you can read it, on the bottom is the Hacker Online Community, hacker.org. So this is a pretty easy industry to participate in if you like. As a matter of fact, I have up here the 2600. It's the Hacker Quarterly magazine that you can get at your local Barnes & Noble. You can get a subscription to, which I opened today. And on page 55, how many people bank with Bank of America? Not a lot.
Just another round.
Bank of America's website flaw allows reading of other customers' statements, and it'll take you through here on page 55 if you want to see any other Bank of America customers' statements and how much they have in their bank account or anything along those lines.
So how many people are now Bank of America customers? No, sorry.
They're a client of ours, by the way. The two items up here on the right-hand side of the screen, Black Hat and DevCon, the industry, the hacking industry, not our industry to help protect companies, the hacking industry actually has its own conferences. They're in August, they're in Las Vegas, and they're called Black Hat and DevCon. So if you want to participate, you can look them up on the internet and actually show up and participate at Black Hat or DevCon. Quick history on the industry. I'm going to try and run fairly quickly to keep us on time. Kevin Mitnick is the gentleman that actually made the hacking industry fairly famous. The industry started based upon anonymity. Notoriety. I knew I'd get that wrong. Notoriety. They all wanted to become famous, and Kevin Mitnick became famous and went out and made $1 million as a hacker. He actually hacked into IBM, Hewlett-Packard, Motorola, Pac-Bell, NEC, and was very vocal about it. You can see his picture in the Wall Street Journal for the number of times he was arrested. Some of these other individuals are people that followed Kevin in the attempt to get some sort of notoriety and make money. It then moved, as the industry evolved, into kind of a proof of concept of how could you make money doing this. It went on here. These people held a bookmaking company in England hostage, as you can see, for I think it was $3 million gross on the extortion. Express Scripts, the company based here in the United States, actually in 2008 put out a bounty of $1 million if you'd help them find out who defaced their website and caused them some harm from some corporate security or some corporate data getting out. This gentleman's interesting as the industry continued to evolve. This was in 2005. Jorn worked with another gentleman, and they worked for a guy whose handle on the internet and the black market of the internet was a guy called the Shark. And they started stealing money from bank accounts in the UK. Jorn and his friends started carving some money off for themselves instead of letting it all go to the Shark and then them getting their piece of it. Well, one day he woke up and his partner had been killed. And he decided, this is a picture of him turning himself in jail as he was walking in, decided he'd be safer in jail than outside trying to see how things would evolve. The most famous one recently, and this was 2009, this gentleman stole at least 130 million credit cards. TJ Maxx, I'm sure everyone's heard of. The Heartland Case, everyone's heard of. This is the gentleman who is convicted, or not convicted, who's accused of stealing at least 130 million credit cards, involved in most of the cases you're aware of. And he made two mistakes. The first was he was located in the United States. He was in Miami, where they will prosecute you. The second mistake he made was he started bragging to all of his friends that his money counting machine was working so hard it kept breaking on him. And they knew something funny had to go on, and eventually they went in and they found millions of dollars in cash in his house down in Miami as they've taken him in, which was actually within the last month. So people often ask, on the black market, what are things worth? Well, your full identity on the black market's worth somewhere between $14 and $18, to give you some idea. The most fascinating on this list to me is if you look at a verified PayPal account balance, it's as high as $500, which is worth more than an online banking account with a $9,900 balance. As I've said, from before 2000, sort of 1995, when the industry started to evolve, you can see it evolved from people looking for notoriety to now all of a sudden people are making money and starting to switch and look for anonymity or to hide in what they're doing. So we don't hear about it quite as much as we did many, many years ago. And it went from the lone soldier to friends getting involved to now all of a sudden criminal gangs. And I'm going to take you through in a minute how it's worked into organized crime and then the opportunities from a cyber terrorism perspective. At SecureWorks, we basically protect corporations around the globe from the hackers in the world. This is a list. The green bar is our client base, which is a little distorted. In the last 2.5 years, it's grown 40%. But the trajectory of that line is not near as high as the trajectory of the red line, which is the increase on our client base of security events against our client base. So that's gone up over threefold to about 9 billion security events a day that we see across a client base of about 2,600 clients around the globe. Gives you some idea of the magnitude of things that are going on. So, the arms suppliers, there is a whole, and I would not suggest you go to any of these websites I'm going to show you in the next couple slides. But nuclearwintercrew.com, secode.com are basically where you can go out and buy hacking code. So if you decide you want to buy some hacking code, here's where you can get it. And they will help divert you to some of the forces, the botnets, the guys that control computers. And in this instance, the rates are up there where you can rent through ssox.net. I think it's .net, yeah. You can rent their botnet armies. You can rent them for a month. You can rent them for individual usage. You can rent them to launch your attacks where you'd like to. Remember, you can go all the way back to Google, click on hacker, third one down, how to become a hacker. It'll then walk you through all this within a matter of minutes. You can be a cyber criminal or a hacker if you'd like. The next one, this is Wasabi Lobby. And this website may have been taken down. It was housed in the Middle East. And what this does is it's the eBay of the websites. And if you want to find an SAP vulnerability, you can buy the SAP vulnerability here. It'll take you over. You can buy it exclusively for 30,000 euro, or you can buy it along with everybody else for 15,000 euro. It'll help you do it. And you can see Novell, IBM. They'll go after anybody if you'd like. This one's a little bit interesting. You can buy a whole turnkey system. This is a botnet where they've infected probably many of the people in this room's computers because they're out there infecting a whole bunch of computers. And it's a 76 service that have branded themselves. You can see the winter brand is up there, the autumn brand is up there, the spring brand, so they're trying to make sure you can see that they're updating things. You can go out and rent their botnet, and a botnet is basically where they've infected a whole bunch of different people's computers. Well, while they were out there, they realized you may have had a movie or you may have music out there, so down in the bottom left-hand part of this screen, you can actually buy the movie from them or the music from them if you'd like while you're there. So they're going after multiple ways of creating a business model as they're doing it. So why is this happening? How has it evolved? Well, basically, it's a very profitable business. It's a very low-risk business. In many instances, in many countries, they're not even prosecuting people relating to it. It's cross-border. It's truly an open Wild West. New services to be exploited. This picture was out on the internet where it was an advertising group that basically said from the Energizer, who was organizing people to work for him, and said there was $300,000 to $500,000 you could make in 90 days working for him across the internet from your home. This has evolved into cyber warfare or cyber terrorism. And some of the ways it's evolved, and it's interesting, in 2007, the FBI reported that there were 108 countries with dedicated cyber attack organizations today. And why are they doing this? Well, I think one of the reasons they're doing it is militarily, I don't think anybody can ever catch up to the United States and where we are from a military perspective. And I think they've realized it's a lot easier to go about doing it from a cyber reconnaissance and a cyber perspective. And I'm going to give you some examples of that in just a minute. Matter of fact, this book here was published in China by the Chinese Army by two colonels to talk about the amount of information you can gather from the United States via the internet today. Another example, well, this was the Chinese hacking into the White House. This was on FT.com in 2008. In 2008, our federal government reported they had over 18,000 security breaches. Matter of fact, one of the things that started in 2007 and went until April of 2009 was the Joint Strike Fighter Squadron, where they went out and basically took several terabytes of data were stolen, but we've been told that none of that data is any of the most sensitive parts of controlling our airplanes. The source of the attack appeared to be in China. In Russia, it's been a little bit different. They've gone after some of what's called more cyber activism, and one of the ways they've done that is they knocked Estonia offline when Estonia was moving some of the Soviet-era World War II memorials. Mm-hmm. There were 300 Lithuanian websites that were shut down and defaced with Soviet symbols after Lithuania banned having Soviet symbols in the country. The Georgia-Russian conflict. It was interesting. Our guys, we have offices around the world, predominantly in North America and in Europe. But when the country of Russia attacked Georgia, they went in from a cyber perspective and did a lot of cyber reconnaissance in advance. They actually went in and took down the internet system while they were attacking with the tanks and came in, which shut down the first responders and shut down a lot of communication, made it very difficult for the country to be able to figure out how to respond to it. What's interesting in this map shows where the attacks were actually coming from. And interestingly enough, the red countries, which you'll notice the largest happens to be the one that we're all in right now, and you can't see it, but the UK happens to be the other large red one, were the largest attackers of Russia to basically, of Georgia, to basically shut the Georgian website down because it was flooded with so much information. Matter of fact, if you wanted to participate, it was very easy. You went to www.stopgeorgia.ru, and this little thing popped up, you put two things in, and all of a sudden you started sending loads of spam into the country to basically overload and flood the internet, and you could have participated to help shut down the internet in Russia. It's the way that they're using Facebook these days, they're using MySpace, and they're trying to get a lot of other people to participate in from a cyber warfare perspective. July 4th of this year, between July 4th and July 9th, there were DDoS's, distributed denial of service, as I was just describing, attacks with at least 20,000 attack vectors, zero cost to the guys who did the attacking on this list of websites. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, DOT, FAA. The FAA was actually compromised, I think it was in 2007 or 2008. Most of the attacks were coming out of Korea. The Department of Homeland Security actually is trying to figure out, so where could this evolve? And I'm not quite sure what could happen as far as where it'll evolve over time. But one of the questions was, and this is on YouTube, by the way, if you can't read the www on the bottom, they put a $1 million power generator out on the network and sort of said, what can we do with it? And effectively, it was blown up with people working over the internet and trying to gain control of things. So this is evolving from the perspective of the cost of cyber attacks are decreasing, the effectiveness is increasing. I think countries, and we've seen a lot of attacks that end up actually across our client base, they mostly come out of Russia, Brazil, China, South Korea, and parts of the Ukraine. And the cost to do this is basically a $3,000 computer and an internet connection, and you're up and running. The battlefield of how this is working today and the types of things they're doing is getting extremely interesting. One of the things that could evolve, and a couple of quick stories that I'll end on, is I put in here some examples of what may happen. Well, for those who don't know, I think it was in 2007, there was waste in Australia, and I hate to pick on Australia after coming from the lunch today, because I think it's a great country. But there was an individual that got in and started releasing over a 2-week period of time wastewater into the drinking water. And he did it via a laptop wirelessly. And he knew how to release just enough so that it didn't taint the water immediately, but got a whole bunch of people sick over a very, very long period of time. The second example I'll give you is on a hospital system. I was given a speech such as this in Atlanta, which is where we're headquartered, and one of the CEOs of a hospital came up to me afterwards and said, you got to come in and look at our stuff and see if we have a problem. And we went in, and the CFO and the CIO clearly didn't want to talk to us. So we went out. I said, look, we had an hour for this meeting. We spent 15 minutes. You don't want to talk to us, and it's clear. Let us go out into the parking lot and see if we can hack into your system. And we won't do anything. We'll just see if we can get in. Well, within 30 minutes, not only do we have access to the CFO's desktop to have all the bonus and salary information for everyone in the hospital, we actually gained control of got into the network and gained control of the IV system for every patient in the hospital. We could have turned the drugs off, we could have increased the drugs, we could have made any change we wanted to wirelessly through a router that had its wireless connection turned on from the parking lot. The last one I'll give you, for those of you who pay bills electronically, and I won't ask you to raise your hands to see who pays bills electronically, is there was an instance in Florida where a gentleman paid some bills electronically. What he didn't realize was his personal computer had been compromised, and they had keystroking and screen scraping on there. So everything he did was being scraped off to another server elsewhere. He logged off the system. They logged onto the system. They had his password. They had his login ID. They moved $125,000 out of his account. The next day he goes in, he logs in, he's like, whoa, where'd my $125,000 go? Called the bank said, you logged in, it's your problem, it's your computer. The case went all the way to the Florida Supreme Court and was settled in a closed settlement with regard to how it worked out. The bank's position was basically, it's your computer, not my computer. We don't control the internet security on your computer. And I'm sure the individual pushed as far as he could to try and get his money back, and I'm not sure how it ended up getting settled in the end. But anyway, thank you very much.
You wanted to say a few words?
Sure.
Thank you, Mike.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike.
You're
A lot of gloom and doom. So, when we look at the situation that Mike described here, the software security industry has definitely morphed and changed over a number of years. And the actors have changed, right? The bad actors have become more mature. They're attacking in different ways. They're doing more things. The industry is trying to mature at the same time. So you're probably saying, why are we getting worse, right? We have antivirus software on most people's machines. We've done a real push in the industry to try to make machines safer. We have operating system companies like Microsoft doing a better job. They really are doing a better job at securing machines. But the problems continue to worsen. One of the reasons is that the incentives are just so great, right? The money to be made by compromise, the money to be made either by cyber terrorism or by stealing data, by selling data, it's too easy, right? And it is to the point of you can find compromises. Now, even in a world where we lock down machines, even in a world where we have secure machines, the problems end up being the OK button, right? I present you with a screen. That screen comes up, and it says, would you like me to steal all your information? And you say, OK. Or in reality, a lot of the attacks that are used are very, very smart. So a company is taken over. So a large company is taken over. Instantly, all of the employees for that company get an email. It says, your 401k has now been taken over and is being administered by this other company, well-known company. So please provide your information for us. Everybody provides the information. That was a fraud. The information is stolen. So the unique attacks are just so good and can scale very well that they're very hard to thwart, even with software, even with good software. The other thing that's happening is that in this industry, we have a lot of new vectors. In years past, you would connect from a single machine to a single machine to do your tasks. You connect to a company to do that task. In today's world, you don't connect to a single company. You connect to a company that then connects to a company that then connects to a company. And a lot of control of that information that flows through all of those layers, control is lost. Data isn't tracked. I saw a great presentation before that showed how much applying for a credit card, how quickly your data flowed into how many places. You'd apply for a credit card in Kansas, and that information would then flow out to all around the world because credit bureaus offer that information to people. Banks look at that information. Other people look at that information. So the information just simply flows extremely quickly to all of these places. Allowing us to do that has given us a great information age, right? So being able to do that is a good thing, but the information is flowing out. That information can then be compromised. If we look at just the last few years initiatives or things that have happened. Social networking has skyrocketed. So if you look at Facebook, you look at Twitter, you look at MySpace, all of those mechanisms to communicate more freely, they're fantastic. But how do you control what that information is flowing through? You know, our government and our armed forces are having huge debates on whether they should allow Facebook, right? The Marines have disallowed it for the moment. The Navy has opened it up. Reason being, you know, you want to be able to communicate with friends and family, but do you want to communicate locations? Do you want to communicate other information? So we are in a quandary of how much information we share, how secure we can be, and still enable enough of the things that we're looking at. One of the other things that was brought up earlier today with energy. If you look at energy and all the questions that we had for energy, how are we going to communicate what the energy use is in homes? We're going to do that over the internet. How are we going to communicate through our power plants, and how are we going to measure and balance our load of energy? It's all through our internet. It's all through communications over the wires. So a lot of work is being done. A lot of work is being done in the software industry to harden, right, and to make things more resilient. And we are in an arms race right now to try to see how we can not just match our nemesises, but how we can get ahead of them. A lot of that's going to take research, and really primary research. And one of the things that has not occurred, or that has occurred in the last few years, is our primary research has actually lessened. And we're doing less research in the areas of true cybersecurity. If you look at what Bell Labs was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, their staff was, 10 times the size of what it is today. So, as we're looking forward, we're looking for ways to do additional research. We're looking for ways to do other things to try to combat this problem.
Thanks. Sarah, you want to tell us a little bit what you're working on now? And
it's, if I may, before I start, we all read about these headlines about being in 2 wars and how many people are serving there and so on. And I just wanted to recognize some of the people here, men and women from West Point, and I hope you've all had a chance to shake their hands. And I just wanted to say, on behalf of Foreign Policy Association, thanks for your service. I'm going to talk about something today, a slightly different dimension, which I know all of you think about as soon as you get up in the morning, and that is Article 5 of the Nato Treaty, and how that compares to, how that relates to cybersecurity. I'm working on a book called NATO 2.0 Reboot or Delete, and this is just a small part of what I'm thinking about. I want to go back, repeat just a little bit of what you said, take you back to 2007 in Estonia, when all of a sudden their major websites went blank. People tracked this and found a very shadowy group in Russia called the Russian Business Network that had something to do with it, but nobody could really pinpoint it. Later on, that same year, the same thing happened in Lithuania. The Lithuanian president came to visit the United States, and as he was here shaking hands with everyone, most of their major websites went blank. This was just a precursor to what was about to happen the next year, which was the war in Georgia and Russia that you referred to. July the 20th, all of a sudden, the websites of the president of Georgia, all of the important ministries, all of the important embassies, including the embassies of the United States, start to get overloaded. The very next day, the same thing happens to the financial institutions. The financial institutions start getting transactions, hard to figure out whether these are real or whether they're all make-believe, but there are so many of them that the financial system gets overloaded. As the financial system gets overloaded because of the interconnection of international banks, the international banks shut down the connections into Georgia. So now there are no transactions taking place out of Georgia, especially with credit cards. Now, as you know, in most of Europe, those of you who've lived there or traveled there, a lot of cell phones are automatically connected into credit cards. So if your credit card stops working, your cell phone traffic stops working. Right? All of this is a precursor to the attack. Interestingly, they trace this to 5 major server sites, 4 that were in Russia, 1, interestingly, in Turkey, that had been commandeered by this group that was doing this. Now, how does all of this relate to where I want to be? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, has at its heart an article called Article 5, which in my book I call the Three Musketeers article, but what it really is as follows. It says an armed attack against any NATO country will be considered an armed attack against all of them. Right. So if a NATO country is attacked, there is the right then for the other NATO countries to come to their defense. The question that I've been thinking about is, what does the word attack mean in this age of cybersecurity? Now, if you go to Article 6 of the NATO Treaty, it talks about territories of any of the participating members in Europe and in North America. It talks about their forces. It talks about their vessels. But what about an attack today? I want to remind you that the 9/11 Commission, when they investigated the terrorist attacks in New York, concluded by saying that it was not just a failure of American institutions, but a success of the terrorist institutions. Mm-hmm. So it's an indication of where threats are going to come from, what the future of warfare is. And I just thought I'd open that topic. I don't have any answers. I have some thoughts. But at least I wanted to set a slightly different platform for us to interact on.
Very good. Excellent. When is your book coming out, by the way?
Next fall.
There you go.
And I should say NATO, by the way, is going through an exercise over the next year to figure out what they want to be for the next 10 years. So that'd be an interesting thing to watch. I bet you cybersecurity will have something to do with it.
Right. So it's a whole year from now your book's coming out? A year from now?
Just about, yeah.
Wow. It takes a long time to publish a book.
It does.
Or a longer time to write it, I guess. Yeah? So it'd be interesting to talk a little bit, if you've been following what's going on in the administration, right? The head of cybersecurity, who was a holder from the Bush administration, right, resigned about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Do you have any insights into what government policy is going on right now, what the government can do, what the government should do? You know, if you were able to, you went to a Senate hearing or a congressional hearing, and they asked you, said, all right, you understand that the challenges are huge. What would you do? What kind of laws would you put in place? What type of things would you do to help our national security and our economy avoid these type of disasters?
I have some thoughts, but not specific suggestions. One of the things that the Obama administration's been doing is appointing a lot of czars. And somebody mentioned more czars than in Russia at one time. But the czar for cybersecurity recently resigned.
Right.
And because there was a conflict about who that person would report to, the National Security Agency, mm-hmm, or into the other economic security organization. My feeling is that we should not have czars for cybersecurity. My feeling is that we should have a permanent appointment that goes through the cabinet chains of command so that Congress has oversight on it. So those are the only words of wisdom I can offer.
Should it be part of Homeland Security?
Could be part of Homeland Security. I was reading a report that Senator Susan Collins, who's the Republican senior person on the Homeland Security Committee, just presented, and she said, you know, we hear every day about cyber terrorist attacks. And she made the point also, by the way, that I wouldn't like to see a czar. I'd like to see someone who Congress can call to task. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I was reviewing what we have in place for cybersecurity.
As in terms of laws?
Laws, yeah, and actually just programs that we have in place. When we looked at those programs in place are very good. They spell out about 30 different areas of cybersecurity that we should look at and that we should act upon. And very well thought out. There's very little statement about what to do. Mm-hmm. no statements whatsoever of how you're going to act.
No enforcement.
No enforcement, but also no idea of research. So no idea of who is going to look into this. What are they going to be doing? What is their schedule? What are the results to occur? Simply a fact that our infrastructure needs to be secured, right? We have problems with virtualized machines are going to create new vectors. Social network is going to create new vectors. So a lot of very good statements about what is going to happen and the threats for today and tomorrow, but very little content and how we make progress going forward. Very little content and how we're going to appropriately regulate or appropriately research or appropriately take action. If you look at the Hannaford breach, they passed their PCI compliance 2 weeks before the breach. So are our regulations working? No, right? So a lot of the work that needs to get done from the administration perspective is to really put action plans in place as opposed to just identifying the problems.
So I think there's part of my comment on this would be it depends on whether you're looking at, you mentioned Hannaford. To me, that's cybercrime rather than cyber terrorism.
Definitely different.
And there's a theory, a conspiracy theory out there that basically the cyber criminals around the world
are funding the
are keeping the cyber terrorists from around the world from doing anything. And I was at lunch today, and I was talking to somebody about what I do, and they said, well, what if they take down the electric grid in the northeastern United States? And I said, so what? Well, who cares, really? I mean, does it make a big difference? Anybody gonna, maybe there's a couple of things, but does it make a big difference in the scheme of things? Yeah, it disrupts us, but it's not like a 9/11 attack. And the belief is that there's so much money being made by cyber criminals, whether you want to say that's governments or whatever, that they are effectively keeping the cyber terrorists from doing anything until they come up with something that's big enough to have an impact, not the little things that could happen. So I think most of it, from my personal perspective, right now really goes back to the early days of the CIA and information, right? What we want is the data and the information to better be able to protect ourselves, and I don't think it goes around regulation and trying to protect borders or require companies to, I'd love it if we require companies to have internet security. But I just don't think that's the right answer.
What about the vendors of software, of browsers, of routers, that's the word, thank you very much. Are they doing a good job at helping solve the problem?
So let me start because I don't want to set you up.
There you go.
I think the issue on that question is that this is not a product solution. It is truly a war. There's this, whether you want to say it's cybercrime or cyber terrorism, it's a war. And in my opinion, there is no technology, there is no magic bullet that's going to fight somebody on the other end who has technology but a human being involved as well. So I think it's only a service it's the reason why I love what I do. It's a service that's going to provide the right defenses. No matter how much you harden a router or how much you harden whatever, we're human beings creating that software, creating that hardware, and there's human beings on the other end who, quite frankly, are being trained and understand what we're doing. I'll give you one other quick case. There was a loss of data in Florida for a financial institution, and I went down to present to the board, and they did not disclose this publicly. And when you looked at, and we did the forensic work on what happened was, I know they had a lawyer sitting over, it was a Russian IP address that came in to steal the data, and I'm convinced they had a lawyer sitting over there who understood our disclosure laws because they took your name, they took your account number, they purposely showed, I'm not taking Social Security number, please look, because I know if I take Social Security number, it has to be disclosed. But I'm going to take the logon ID, and I'm going to take your bank account and your password. And they basically within 36 hours, they created ATMs back in the United States and stole $150,000 out of the bank before the bank shut it down. And what was fascinating to me was they never even disclosed it. Because they didn't have to. The bank board panicked and looked and said, well, we don't have to disclose it. The lawyers are telling us they don't. So they have just as smart of people on the other end of this war. And I think it's a system of you need to have both people and technology in order to defend against yourself. So I didn't want you to jump in and start talking about hardening and software and things of that nature.
A little bit. Right? So will software help? Okay, yes. Will it make it harder for the criminals to accomplish their task? Yes. At some point, we may disagree on this one, but at some point we're going to reach an inflection point, and that point is, a number of us in the cyber industry feel that we're going to hit an inflection point where you're going to see malware drop off dramatically. And the reason you're going to see malware drop off dramatically is that the cost per value has now shifted, and that it's better and more cost effective to go towards an insider threat as opposed to creating malware. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, because the industry is making progress in hardening system, the industry is making progress in making more resilient software. It takes a long time for software to get into the market. Right. How many people are still running Windows XP, right? Vista, for all its problems, did do a better job on security, and Microsoft continues to do more. Mm-hmm. So we have an industry, though, that is making billions of dollars. That industry will not stop overnight simply because we put better software in place. Mm-hmm. They're looking at new business models all the time. What's the next thing, right? Okay, well, if I can't exploit vulnerabilities in software, I can't take control that way, how am I going to make my next $1 billion? I need to be able to grow my business. And that could be insider threat. That could be other methods that would effectively keep their business running. Mm-hmm. But this business won't stop easily.
So I'll say one other thing, and then I probably
sure.
My theory is that the balance of wealth in the world is imbalanced, and that there are people in third world countries, if you will, or in the far Eastern European countries who are well trained, who can make a lot of money very quickly getting on the internet through automated programs and then through some specific work. If you put a brand new computer on the internet today, it's somewhere between 4 and 6 minutes before somebody scans it to decide if they want to go in and look at it.
Wow.
Yep.
4 to 6 minutes.
Before they scan it.
Before they scan it.
Right.
Right. And what it'll do is it'll send data back to them, and then they'll decide.
They'll say yes.
I have a high net worth person here. He's vulnerable. I can go after him. But that's the kind of data. So although and they're like, it's like water. They're going to go to whoever's the least protected. So I agree in that as better software gets rolled out, the people who are better protected are less likely to get a hit. But I also think you have a very focused individual on the other end who is making $500. I mean, I think the average policeman in Russia makes $2,000 a year. Yeah. Well, if I can spend a lot of time and effort and energy to steal a lot of money, a lot easier and cheaper and quicker.
So just one note here that it's not all doom and gloom. If you look at, we'll give you a pitch here. If you look at a customer of a managed security service and how often they would get breached as opposed to a customer trying to roll their own security due to the expertise and other things, the folks that subscribe to those services are much more protected. I won't give you numbers, but the numbers are great, I mean, in that market. So you can create a secure environment. Usually environments that aren't secure are environments that are misconfigured, environments that haven't had the right patches, environments that are run by people that don't have the right skills. So it is possible to create secure environments and have collaboration.
Hey, before we go to questions, I just had one other point, and that is the tracing back and identification of the computers that are doing it. That's one of the very tricky issues, is how do you figure out where this is coming from. In that Georgia, Russia example that I gave previously, they figured out that one of the computers was in Turkey, but it had been taken over by the folks who were doing the nasty things. So now on the Nato, if they ever decide that a cyber attack is indeed an Article 5 attack, they could then have gone and attacked the Turkish computer, no matter where it was. But it turned out that that computer center also controlled a large part of the Middle Eastern airspace. And so this whole issue is a very tricky one. I just wanted to throw that out before we get to questions.
So we'll open it up to the audience. If anyone has questions, and we'll use the same rules used before, which is identify yourself and ask a question. Any questions from the... And we are going to end on time. We are actually at a little traveling road show today. We have to go do this presentation at 69th and Park in a few minutes. So we're going to have to escape quickly. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Mohammed Shahzad. I actually come from a physical security background. So my question what we have learned in our industry very significantly is that people will buy millions of dollars worth of software and then assume that it just does the thing for themselves. And you can just easily breach into it, because if somebody wants to breach into something, they will find a way. So policy and procedures on how you not only mitigate against systems, but very robust policy and procedure is very significant. And it's a very core part of the physical security industry. I'm curious to know, in cybersecurity, is that also the case, not just network or IT technical policy in terms of how to anticipate attacks, how to mitigate them, and once you have an attack, how quickly to resolve and communicate. Because you could buy millions and millions of dollars worth of software if you don't have policy, because just as there's a smart person at the other end, if you have another human being at the other end who is not monitoring and controlling that policy, your software won't be valuable. So I'm just curious as to what the approach of cybersecurity is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Policy and compliance with, sometimes it gets, the policy term gets roped into regulatory compliance, but it's really compliance with your own policy. Whenever we look at securing a system or securing a company, that's the first thing we look at, is how mature their policy is across their organization. What their policy is for both machine policies and software that's running on those policies, what they're going to do, and especially connectivity, interconnectivity between partners, what they expect those partners to have for policy, making sure that policy flows from one company to the partner companies and across those things. But a complete policy, I do think that they do fall down often on the policy side for what I'm going to do when things happen. Yeah, that's some places where probably we haven't matured as much, but definitely in the software industry, policy is where we start.
It's called GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. So it starts with the appropriate governance, and then assessing your risks, and then doing the appropriate compliance around it, which includes training and all the types of things you're talking about.
Yep.
Sir.
Well, I actually have two quick questions. One is like cybercrime is a crime. Breaking into someone's computers or into a bank is like breaking into someone's house. So what is the state of the legal protection for this? Because I'm wondering if it will be possible to overcome it without developing legal network. And second, in international crime, cooperation between police forces and organizations like Interpol help to fight the crime. In a similar way, is there any cooperation? What is the level of cooperation between police and cybersecurity organizations around the world? Thank you.
I'll let you go first.
I think I got the questions, but if I don't respond appropriately, hopefully you guys will keep me in. It really depends upon the country you're dealing with, right? There is cooperation within certain of the countries in the United States. In many, there are not. And whether it's Interpol, or the other agencies. We belong to a member called FIRST, which I know you guys are a member of as well, which is the Foreign Incident Response Security Team, which is a group of individuals, companies around the world that share data back and forth.
Right.
And we've been able around the world to get, for example, bad servers shut down. And we've also had instances, quite frankly, within the United States where we're relating to the Russian-Georgian attack, where there were servers on the West Coast that were housed in an ISP we identified. Right. And we went to the Secret Service, and they said
shut it down.
They did not.
Oh, they didn't shut
They
that
actually said that they'd rather see and learn the information of what was going on than to shut it down.
Okay. But in some ways, a number of the hackers are operating in countries that we can't touch, right? And that's the smart ones, right? As you said, that the I can't remember which example but it was his only mistake was operating out of Florida, right? So if you're operating out of certain countries, then you're much safer. Now, operating out of countries means that you can basically take over machines elsewhere, all over the world, in our country, and do your attacks anonymously through those other parties. So physical location is difficult to assess sometimes.
In the back?
I'm David Bailey from West Point, and we have a lot of hackers in the United States, and they're very hard to fight. But I'm wondering if we can look at them as an asset instead of a liability, and if it would be, my question is, if it would be possible for the government to attempt to co-opt them so that basically we could use them and the government could pick the targets and try to guide their activities better.
So your question's a fascinating one. Yes. And I joined this industry in 2002, and I went to the primary conference, which is called the RSA conference out in California. And it was fascinating to me because Kevin Mitnick, the first gentleman I mentioned, was on the stage, and they had the lawyer that defended Kevin. They had the U.S. attorney that prosecuted Kevin, and they had the CTO, or the Chief Information Security Officer, I'm sorry, for Hewlett-Packard. And the discussion was, Kevin had been convicted 3 times and served jail term, and his last contract was $1 million, I think. And the question was, should you hire convicted felons? And the person that was talking about physical security a minute ago, the question is, if I robbed a bank successfully, would you hire me to help protect the bank? This is the only industry to me where I sat in the back of the room, there were 5,000 heated people arguing back and forth, and I thought, wow, the line between right and wrong is so gray, it's mind-boggling to me. I've never been in the physical security business. Right. My guess is you will never hire someone that's a convicted felon for hiring a bank because you just can't trust their integrity. Yet in this industry, 5,000 people argued for an hour and a half over whether you should hire somebody that's a convicted felon.
So I think in that stage, at that point in time, many of the people that we were debating, I was in that crowd, were people that were working for notoriety. Those were the people that put an Easter egg on your computer to simply say, I did it. So those type of people which were not going for harm were the ones that we were debating whether we would still hire. And the debate raged. And so from a security industry and from, speaking from the top companies in the security industry, we would not hire. So Symantec would not hire anyone, CA would not hire anyone. I know McAfee would not hire anyone. So for the major security players would not hire anybody that was convicted of cybercrime, but others would.
But I'd argue that even the Easter egg, it's either right or it's wrong. You either, whether you got caught and convicted, right. If you committed a crime, you committed a crime.
Yep, it was years ago, but that was different times.
On the military area, I think that would be a very natural thing to do. I mean, intelligence agencies have always hired murderers and thugs and crooks. And I don't mean that flippantly, but I think what that points to is a whole transformation of the defense industry. And I was talking to some of you about how quickly the changes feed back into West Point. But I think that's a very serious consideration, ought to be given a great deal of thought.
And there's a lot of work actually going on in the cybersecurity offensive position for the government. There's a lot of research that goes on into there. There's a lot of questions that occur. In the industry, we debate whether it's ethical for us to go attack somebody that has attacked us. And in most cases, we don't, because it's usually your grandmother, right? Because she got infected, so why should we take down her machine? That would not be appropriate. But that's the truth, right? We have capabilities to do a reverse denial of service attack, but it ends up being on the wrong people.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time.
Quick question.
Oh, this is...
Yeah, but
do any of your companies have a division that had contractors in Iraq?
I've lost control. Sorry. Go ahead.
I have contractors.
Can I get one quick question?
Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead.
I'm Ed Friedman from Stevens Institute of Technology. There's been a lot of discussion about hardware and software, but very little, no discussion about the Internet itself. The Internet is a 1970s technology. There's a lot of research going on in the United States and Europe and elsewhere on designing a next generation of Internet. As that is done, to what extent are there opportunities to put in new safeguards for security?
Mr. Gore is working on it. Mr. Gore is working on it.
Yeah, there's absolutely new opportunities. I mean, if you look at new protocols that are being defined, so IPv6 and other things, so we can address all of these little devices that we have, right? That's one of the problems that we have. So there are possibilities to put more and more security into the network itself, but the network itself can only do so much, can only see so much. It only has so much visibility. So a clean pipe doesn't necessarily mean a clean, everything else clean.
Suppose you have smart switches and smartness built into the Internet.
You can, but again, that you can't stop all attacks, right? You can't stop the OK button from coming up because it's a valid thing to do. So you can't stop some of the more effective attacks. So cleaning the pipe isn't the only thing that would not solve everything.
Thank you.
Let's thank the panelists. Okay.